The story begins in Northern California in 2007, inside a large home where friends and family have gathered to celebrate a newly engaged couple. As night falls, the guests stay up together, talking and unwinding, until someone suggests they share ghost stories. One of the guests volunteers to tell a tale, and she reveals that this particular story belongs to someone she actually knows. Intrigued, the others lean in, eager to hear every word. And so, the woman begins her haunting tale. The story opens in London, 1987, where we meet Dany Clayton, a young, reserved schoolteacher who keeps to herself by choice. She's come all the way to London to meet Lord Henry Wingrave, a renowned lawyer, after spotting his advertisement seeking a live-in nanny for his late brother's children. Hopeful, Dany heads to his office for the interview, and Henry welcomes her warmly. He explains that his niece and nephew are exceptional, gifted children, but admittedly a handful, especially Miles, who needs serious structure and discipline after returning from boarding school. Henry asks if she'd be willing to homeschool both Miles and his younger sister Flora at the manor. He goes on to describe the estate, a massive countryside property that's less of a house and more of a sprawling manor. Miles and Flora are deeply attached to the place, especially after losing both their parents. At the manor, Dany would be working alongside a cook, a groundskeeper, and a housekeeper who manages the household affairs. Henry makes one thing crystal clear. She's only to call him in case of an absolute emergency. He's a busy man, and he has no patience for trivial matters. After hearing it all, Dany agrees without hesitation, genuinely thrilled at the opportunity. But Henry isn't convinced. Skeptical, he presses her, asking what she might be hiding. After all, most applicants for a position like this tend to be much older. And here she is, barely 30, ready to abandon her life and lock herself away in the countryside with two difficult children. Calmly, Dany turns the question right back on him. She points out that he should be the one suspicious. A job this easy, with pay this generous, has been advertised for 6 months, and not a single person has applied. Surely, there must be a secret he's keeping from her. After Henry's rejection, Dany heads to a nearby bar, scrolling through other job listings, hoping something might come through. Then, out of nowhere, Henry himself walks into the very same bar. Determined, she walks right up to him, sits down, and suggests they share a drink. She's not leaving until she gets the truth about the manor and the children. Reluctantly, Henry opens up. He confesses that no one applies for this position because of what happened to the previous nanny. The poor woman took her own life inside the manor. Soon after, the rumors began to spread. The townspeople started whispering that anyone who got close to those children or to that house met a tragic end. First the parents, then the nanny. A cursed pattern no one wanted to be part of. Touched, Dany tells him she understands grief better than most. She knows exactly what those children must be feeling, and if he gives her the chance, she truly believes she can make a difference in their lives. Moved by her sincerity, Henry finally agrees. Back at her hotel room, something subtle but strange catches our eye. Dany has covered the mirror in her room. Quietly, she packs her things and calls her mother to share the news, that she got the job and is staying in London for good. Her mother, however, isn't celebrating. She tells Dany that what she's doing isn't right, that running away isn't the answer. Frustrated, Dany snaps back, insisting she isn't running from anything. As she steps out of the room, she glances at the covered mirror, and we finally see what she's been trying so hard to avoid: the terrifying ghost of a young man staring back at her. The next morning, Dany waits for the car that will take her to the manor. Soon, Owen, the household cook, pulls up to greet her, and the two set off together. The drive is long, and Dany drifts off into a deep sleep along the way. When she finally wakes up, she's mesmerized by the rolling countryside scenery. Smiling, she tells Owen she had assumed he was just the driver. He chuckles and explains that yes, he drives Henry around and runs errands for him, but his real passion is cooking. He's the chef of the manor, and he's been studying culinary arts in hopes of becoming a great chef one day. When Dany finally arrives at the manor, she's greeted by Flora, a sweet, charming little girl who welcomes her with the brightest smile. Flora tells Dany she hadn't expected her to be so beautiful, and Dany, touched by the compliment, thanks her warmly. Glancing toward the water, Dany mentions how lovely the lake looks. But the moment she says it, Flora's expression shifts. Tense and uneasy, the little girl quickly warns her to stay far away from the lake. The smell, she says, is awful. The water isn't clean. Eager to introduce her, Flora takes Dany inside to meet her brother, Miles. Standing beside him is Hannah Grose, the housekeeper who runs the manor's affairs. Warm and welcoming, Hannah greets Dany sincerely and offers to show her to her room and give her a tour of the estate. Sweetly, Miles steps forward and presents Dany with a small gift, a delicate hairpin. That evening, Owen prepares dinner, and everyone gathers around the table. Mid-meal, Owen excuses himself, explaining that his mother is unwell and he needs to go stay the night with her. Later, Dany helps Flora with her bath. As they sit together, something strange happens. Flora keeps looking off to the side, almost as if someone else is in the bathroom with them. Then, suddenly, Flora's mood darkens. She spots the hairpin tucked into Dany's hair and her face falls. Confused, Dany explains that Miles gave it to her as a welcome gift. But Flora, visibly upset, reveals the truth. That hairpin belonged to Rebecca, the previous nanny, the one who took her own life. Apologetic, Dany quickly removes it and tells the little girl she's sorry if she upset her. But then, Dany notices it again, Flora's gaze fixed intently on something just out of view, as if there's someone else in the room with them. A chill runs down Dany's spine. Calmly, Flora asks her to help her out of the tub so she can get dressed, then politely asks if she can play with her dolls for a little while before bed. Dany agrees. Just then, glancing at the mirror, Dany sees him again, the same haunting figure of the young man she keeps seeing wherever she goes. Trying to shake it off, Dany heads to Flora's room to tuck her in for the night. There, she discovers something curious. A miniature dollhouse modeled after the manor itself, filled with little dolls that look strikingly similar to the people who live there. There are other unfamiliar dolls too, ones Dany doesn't recognize. As she bends down to pick a few off the floor, she finds one tucked beneath the bed. But the moment she reaches for it, Flora stops her. That doll, she insists, must always stay under the bed. Then, in the most matter-of-fact tone, Flora makes Dany promise something. No matter what she hears, no matter what happens, Dany must never, ever wander the manor at night. She must stay in her bed until morning. Reassuringly, Dany promises she'll listen, but sleep doesn't come easily. Tossing and turning, Dany battles a brutal bout of insomnia. Eventually, she gives up and decides to head down to the kitchen to make herself something warm to drink. And in that moment, somewhere in the house, something stirs. Something that doesn't belong. The next morning, Flora is upset with Dany. Genuinely, deeply upset. She knows Dany left her room during the night. Stunned, Dany asks how she could possibly know that. Flora's answer is unsettling. She tells Dany she has to listen, that she has to obey the rules so the Lady of the Lake doesn't hurt her. Dany stares at her, more confused than ever. Then, glancing up at the manor, Dany spots someone standing on one of the balconies. She waves at him, trying to get his attention, but in the blink of an eye, he vanishes. When Dany heads back inside, she finds everyone gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. Joining them is Jamie, the groundskeeper who tends to the gardens. Cold and distant, Jamie barely acknowledges Dany's presence, treating her as if she isn't even there, trying to make sense of what she just saw. Dany asks Owen and Hannah if there's another man living at the manor. They exchange puzzled looks. Owen tells her there's no one else there besides the people in this room. But Dany insists. She saw a man, clear as day. And in that moment, Miles and Flora glance at each other, a quiet, knowing look that says everything and nothing at once. Hannah gently brushes it off, suggesting Dany must have been imagining things. Determined to clear her head, Dany decides to take a walk around the grounds. Outside in the garden, she stumbles across one of Flora's dolls, lying in the grass with the strangest, most unsettling appearance. Then she notices a small chapel tucked beside the manor. Curious, she steps inside and finds Hannah there. The two strike up a conversation, and Dany asks about Flora's enormous doll collection. Hannah explains that the little girl simply loves playing with them. Then, her voice softening, she opens up about everything those poor children have endured. The death of their parents, the suicide of Rebecca, the previous nanny. She tells Dany about Rebecca's relationship with a wicked man named Peter Quint, who stole a large sum of money from Henry and vanished without a trace. Peter played Rebecca like a fiddle, broke her completely, and left her so utterly destroyed that she walked into the lake and ended her own life. And the one who found her, who saw her floating there, was Flora. The poor child was devastated. The whole manor sank into a heavy, mournful silence for a long, long time afterward. Hannah goes on to explain that Flora sees some of her dolls as charms, little protectors guarding the manor from harm. That's why she loves them so dearly, why she cares for them with such devotion. That night, Dany is in Flora's room helping her settle in when Miles suddenly walks in and asks Dany to fetch something from Flora's wardrobe. The moment Dany steps inside, Flora and Miles slam the wardrobe door shut, locking her in. Furious, Dany snaps at them, telling them this isn't the time for games. But then, panic sets in. The two children frantically try to open the door, only to find it jammed shut. Convinced they're still playing some cruel prank, Dany's anger boils over. But then, her fury turns to terror. Glancing at the small mirror inside the wardrobe, she sees him again, the ghost of the young man, staring right back at her. Hysterical, she screams, calling out to Miles and Flora, begging them to help her. After what feels like an eternity, the door finally swings open. Shaken, the children try to apologize, swearing they didn't mean for any of it to happen. But Dany has no patience left. Coldly, she tells them to go to bed. She doesn't want to hear another word. On her way back to her room, Dany notices something odd on the floor. Footprints. 2 sets of them, trailing across the manor. Curious, she follows them, hoping to find out where they came from. The trail leads her right outside the house. Stunned, she stares at the prints, trying to make sense of it all. Then she glances up, and there, standing at her bedroom window, is Flora, watching her in complete silence. The next morning, Dany sits Miles and Flora down for a serious conversation about what happened the night before. She's decided they need to be punished, just enough to teach them a lesson. But the children stand firm, insisting it was all an accident, that they never meant for any of it to happen. Calmly, Dany comes up with a fitting consequence. She tells Miles he's going to spend the day cleaning every single footprint in the manor, because she's already pieced it together. Those footprints came from him, and one quick glance at Hannah confirms that she's figured it out too. Later, Dany takes Flora downstairs to retrieve one of her dolls from the cellar, where Miles had tossed it earlier. But Flora freezes at the doorway, refusing to go any further. She quietly tells Dany she hates the cellar. Sighing, Dany heads down alone, and the moment she reaches the bottom, she stops cold. There, sitting in the middle of the cellar, is the doll, posed in the strangest, most unsettling way. A chill runs through her. Something about this place isn't right. Quickly, she grabs the doll and hurries back up to Flora, returning it to her safely. Afterward, Dany goes looking for Miles and finds him sitting alone, staring blankly out the window, lost somewhere far away. She calls out to him, but he doesn't respond. He doesn't even seem to hear her. The story rewinds 6 months earlier, back to when Miles was still at boarding school. He's sitting in class with his classmates, going through the motions of an ordinary day. Then, during a break, he climbs to the top of an enormous tree alongside one of his friends, a boy named Hooper. Without warning, Miles lets go and throws himself off the branch. He hits the ground hard. His arm shatters and ends up in a cast. The very next day, Miles gets into a brutal fistfight with one of his classmates. Punches fly, and the situation escalates fast. Afterward, his teacher pulls him aside, desperate to understand what could have driven him to lash out so violently. But Miles says nothing. He just sits there in heavy silence, a quiet, broken boy still grieving the loss of his parents. That same night, the teacher walks into his quarters and finds something horrifying: his pet pigeon, lifeless on the floor. The next day, Miles is brought before the headmaster and the teachers. They give him an ultimatum. Either he opens up and explains his behavior, or he's expelled. Miles answers, but his words send a chill through the room. He says he regrets killing the pigeon, but only because he should have done more. He should have ended its life slowly, gutted it, made it suffer. Horrified, the headmaster and the entire faculty make their decision on the spot. Miles is expelled. Later, when Hooper goes to take Miles's place in the dormitory, he discovers something tucked beneath the pillow. A letter from Flora. He unfolds it carefully, and inside is a small drawing, a desperate plea from a little sister begging her brother to come home, to come back to her. And just like that, the truth becomes clear. Miles had been acting out, doing every horrible thing he could think of, all so they would expel him and send him back home, back to Flora. Back in the present, Dany walks into Flora's room and finds her playing with a pair of glasses she discovered somewhere in the manor. The moment Dany lays eyes on them, her whole body goes rigid. Tense and shaken, she rushes out of the room and heads straight to the garden, breaking down in tears. Jamie spots her in that fragile state and quietly tries to comfort her, doing her best to calm her nerves. Later, Miles picks a small bouquet of flowers from the garden, hoping to give them to Dany as an apology for locking her in the wardrobe. But there's something off about him. Something Dany can't quite place. His behavior toward her feels strange, almost rehearsed. That night, Dany decides to play with Miles and Flora before bedtime. Flora picks the game, hide and seek. The 2 children scatter and disappear, leaving Dany to search the entire manor for them. But no matter where she looks, she can't find a single trace of either child. Then she hears it, a faint sound coming from the forbidden wing of the manor. Reluctantly, she follows it. The closer she gets, the clearer it becomes. It's music, a delicate melody drifting from a small music box. Out of nowhere, Miles lunges at her, his hands wrapping around her throat in a chokehold. Just as quickly, he releases her and bolts, daring her to catch him. Furious, Dany shouts after him, telling him the game is over. but Miles ignores her completely. Then, glancing toward the window, Dany sees him again. The same man she had seen on the balcony, standing right there, watching her. Heart pounding, she grabs a nearby cane and rushes outside, ready to confront him. But the moment she steps out, he's gone. Vanished, as if he was never there. Suddenly, she sees Miles through the window, collapsing to the floor. She races toward him, panicked. Hannah comes running too. Dany tells her to call the police immediately. There's a stranger inside the manor. Meanwhile, in the cellar, Flora is sitting calmly with a strange, terrifying figure, the ghost of a woman. In her tiny hands is a photograph, the very same man Dany just saw, posing beside Rebecca, the two of them together. Back upstairs, Miles slowly comes to, and as his eyes drift toward the window, he sees him too, the same man Dany had been chasing. The story rewinds 1 year earlier. The man's name is Peter Quint, and he had been working alongside Henry at his law office. One day, Rebecca walks into the firm to interview for the position of nanny. The moment Peter lays eyes on her, he's captivated, mesmerized. When Henry approves her for the job, it's Peter who drives her out to the manor. There, she meets Owen, Hannah, Jamie, and the children. Sitting down with little Flora, Rebecca learns that her dolls aren't ordinary dolls at all. They're something far more meaningful. Just then, Peter walks in carrying a beautiful bouquet of flowers, presenting them to Flora as a gift. Thrilled, she beams at him, then turns to Rebecca, asking if they could go put the flowers in a vase together. That night, Peter sits down with Rebecca and starts working his charm. Smoothly, he tells her she deserves so much more than this, that someone as smart and beautiful as her shouldn't be wasting her potential as a nanny. Touched, Rebecca opens up to him. She confesses her real dream is to become a lawyer, to fight for justice for the countless women and girls who suffer abuse every single day. The two of them stay up late into the night, sharing pieces of their lives with each other. And quietly, Peter reaches over, trying to take her hand. The next day, Peter informs Miles, Flora, and Rebecca that he'll be staying at the manor for a few days, on Henry's orders. And it doesn't take long before he and Rebecca fall into a passionate love affair. The day after, Peter takes Rebecca into the forbidden wing of the manor. Right away, she notices the strange footprints on the floor and stops dead in her tracks, refusing to enter any of the rooms. The rules are the rules, she insists, and they have to be followed. But Peter brushes off her concerns, assuring her that he's already cleared everything with Henry. Reluctantly, she follows him inside. Waiting for her is a stunning fur coat. The moment she sees it, she gasps. That coat belongs to Charlotte, Flora's mother. There's no way she can wear something like that. But Peter, ever the smooth talker, swears that Henry approved it himself and asked him to give it to her. Convinced, Rebecca slips it on, and the two of them pose for a photo together, smiling like a couple without a care in the world. Then, out of nowhere, Hannah walks in. Cold and sharp, she tells Rebecca to go check on the children, who have been looking for her. Once Rebecca is gone, Hannah unleashes on Peter. She scolds him for sneaking into the forbidden wing, for daring to give Charlotte's coat to Rebecca, and warns him in no uncertain terms never to pull a stunt like this again. Later, Rebecca finds Peter packing his bags. He tells her he's leaving, and his tone is sharp, bitter, almost cruel. He's noticed how friendly she's been with Owen, and it's eating him alive. Stunned, Rebecca stares at him, completely thrown by the venom in his voice. Back in the present, the police have arrived at the manor. By now, Flora has handed Dany the photograph she had been holding in the cellar. The moment Dany sees it, the breath leaves her lungs. The man in the picture is the very same man she's been seeing all over the manor, the one who keeps appearing and vanishing into thin air. Hannah recognizes him instantly. That, she tells Dany, is Peter Quint, the one she had warned her about. The man who used to work for Henry, who stole a massive sum of money from him, who seduced and broke Rebecca before disappearing without a trace. The officer turns to Hannah and asks if she's seen Peter recently. She tells him no, not since the day he ran off. The officer informs them that he's already searched the entire property and found absolutely no one. He simply tells them to make sure all the doors of the manor are locked tight. Frustrated, Hannah and Dany exchange a look. He hasn't helped them at all. Determined to find some answers herself, Dany heads out into the gardens, searching every corner in case Peter is hiding somewhere on the property. There, she finds Jamie doing the exact same thing. That night, the group decides to sleep together in one room, just to be safe in case anything happens. Sitting up late, they brainstorm what could possibly bring Peter back after he had run off and vanished without a trace. Eventually, exhaustion wins, and they each retreat to their own rooms for the night. Just as Dany settles into her bed, she feels something. Hands on her body, and blood smeared all over the sheets. Terrified, she lurches up, only to realize none of it is real. It was all in her head. The next morning, Dany goes to check on Flora and finds her room empty. Panicked, she searches the manor and finally finds the little girl down by the lake. Flora is sobbing, hysterical, screaming as if she's seen something terrible. And in that moment, the truth becomes clear. Flora had seen the ghost of Rebecca in the lake. Soon after, the doctor arrives to examine Flora. He reassures Dany and Hannah that the little girl is perfectly fine. Confused, Dany asks why Henry still hasn't shown up despite all their phone calls. Hannah simply explains that Henry rarely visits the manor, only when something truly disastrous has happened. That evening, Miles and Flora decide to put on a little play, a story performed just for the household. Everyone gathers around to watch and cheer them on. Mid-performance, the phone rings. Jamie picks up. It's Owen's neighbor, calling with heartbreaking news. Owen's mother has passed away. Quietly, Owen leaves at once to be with her. Soon after, Jamie heads out as well. Dany turns around, and there he is, the ghost of the young man she keeps seeing in every mirror, standing right in front of her. Terrified, she screams. The story rewinds back to Dany's childhood. We see her as a young girl, sitting beside her best friend Eddie, the boy she had spent every chapter of her life with. The two of them grew up side by side, inseparable, until eventually they grew up and got engaged. But Dany isn't glowing the way a bride-to-be should. Her smile is forced, her excitement hollow. And when Eddie's sister proudly shows her the wedding dress she had picked out especially for her, Dany's heart sinks. The weight of it all crashes down on her in one quiet, devastating moment. One evening, Dany and Eddie head out for a romantic dinner. The moment Eddie starts talking about the wedding, Dany's whole body tenses up. She decides it's time to come clean. Quietly, gently, she tells him she loves him deeply, with all her heart, but she can't go through with the marriage. Eddie freezes. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Stunned, he gets up and storms out. The two of them climb into the car to head home, and Dany tries to explain herself. She tells him she only said yes to the engagement because she didn't want to break his heart or break their mother's hearts either. Everyone had been so happy, so excited for them, but she couldn't keep pretending anymore. She couldn't keep forcing herself to live a lie. Furious, Eddie throws the door open and storms out of the car. And then, out of nowhere, it happens. A car comes barreling down the road and slams into him. Dany screams. Trembling, she scrambles out of the car and rushes to his side, only to find him drowning in his own blood. Devastated, she ends up at the hospital with Eddie's family, holding her breath, praying for a miracle. But the miracle never comes. Eddie is gone, and the moment she hears the words, something inside Dany breaks forever. Drowning in guilt, Dany begins to see Eddie's ghost in every mirror she passes. At his funeral, the worst happens. Glancing into a mirror, she sees him standing right behind her. Hysterical, she throws a cloth over the mirror, hands shaking, heart pounding, completely unable to face what she has done. Back in the present, Jamie and Dany are dressed in black, on their way to attend the funeral of Owen's mother. Afterward, the whole household gathers in the kitchen, preparing food together to honor the day. Glancing at the mirror, Dany freezes. Eddie's ghost is staring back at her once again. The blood drains from her face, and everyone around her exchanges puzzled, worried looks. Then, through the window, she spots him, Peter. Without thinking, Dany throws the door open, ready to grab him, ready to fight. But the moment she steps outside, she stops dead. It's Owen, standing right there. Embarrassed, she quickly apologizes and tells him she had mistaken him for Peter. The two of them sit down together, sharing a quiet dinner side by side. Later, Dany goes to talk to Flora. Carefully, she asks if she's seen Peter at all since the day he disappeared. Flora's face tightens. She denies it firmly. Then her eyes drift again, gazing off at something invisible, as if there's someone else in the room with them. Curious, Dany asks her, gently, why she always does that, why she always seems to be looking at someone no one else can see. But Flora denies it completely. She insists she isn't doing anything. She insists there's no one there. Soon after, Dany joins Hannah, Owen, and Jamie out in the garden. They've lit a small fire and are sitting around it together, sharing a quiet moment. Eventually, Owen and Hannah drift off to talk privately, leaving Dany and Jamie alone by the flames. Curious, Jamie turns to her and asks why she always reacts the way she does, as if she's just seen a ghost standing right in front of her. Heart heavy, Dany decides to tell her everything. About Eddie, about what happened between them on that final night, about the guilt that has followed her ever since. Touched, Jamie listens quietly, then does her best to comfort her. She tells Dany that all of it is just in her head. Nothing more than tricks her mind is playing on her. She has to be strong. She has to fight back. That night, Dany can't sleep. Eddie's glasses are still with her, sitting in her room like a constant reminder of everything she lost. Finally, she decides she's had enough. It's time to let them go. At the same time, Flora wakes up in a panic, glancing toward her dollhouse, her eyes widen in horror. Dany's doll isn't on the bed where it should be. Worse, the doll of the Lady of the Lake is now standing inside the manor itself. Terrified, the little girl screams for Miles, and the two of them rush straight to Dany. They beg her to stop, pleading with her to just stay put. Flora claims she had a nightmare, that she can't sleep, and the two children keep stalling, keep distracting her, doing everything in their power to delay her until the ghost of the Lady of the Lake has left the house. Eventually, Dany tucks Flora back into bed and reassures her everything is all right. Then she heads outside and tosses Eddie's glasses into the fire, watching them burn, finally letting him go. And in that very moment, the ghost of Eddie appears, standing right in front of her, staring straight into her soul. Meanwhile, Hannah and Owen are still sitting together. Quiet and lost in thought, Hannah drifts into her own memories. The story rewinds back to the day Hannah's world collapsed, the day she found out her husband Sam had left her for another woman. Devastated, she had run out into the garden, sobbing uncontrollably. But she wasn't alone. Charlotte, the mother of Flora and Miles, had been in the garden too and overheard her cries. Concerned, Charlotte gently asked what was wrong, and Hannah opened up to her completely. Charlotte was stunned, heartbroken for her, but she made Hannah a beautiful promise. She told her she could stay at the manor with them forever. After the deaths of Charlotte and her husband Dominic, Hannah began noticing strange behavior from Peter. He kept slipping into Charlotte's room when no one was looking, rummaging through her things. Suspicious, Hannah confronted him and accused him of stealing from the very people he worked for. Peter laughed in her face. Coldly, he reminded her that she was nothing more than a servant, and she'd better not forget it. Sometimes, he sneered, she acted like she actually owned the place. But one day, when she was old and gray, no one was going to remember her. No one was going to care. Hannah didn't even flinch. Calmly, she took the necklace he had stolen right out of his hand. Furious, Peter threatened her, swearing he would have Henry throw her out of the manor. But Hannah stood her ground. This place, she told him, was her home, and if anyone was getting thrown out, it was going to be him. One night, Peter steps out of Rebecca's room and freezes. Standing right there in the hallway are Hannah, Flora, and Miles. Confused, he sharply tells the children to head back to bed. But Hannah cuts him off. Her voice is firm. She warns him to leave at once because they had all heard a strange noise echoing through the manor. Peter ignores her completely. Out of nowhere, the Lady of the Lake lunges at him. She grabs hold of him and drags him away into the darkness. Frozen in place, Miles, Flora, and Hannah stand there in absolute horror, unable to comprehend what they just witnessed. Then, just as suddenly, Peter walks back in. Calm, casual, talking as if nothing had happened at all. He notices the doll in Flora's hands and his face shifts. Tense, he asks her where she got it. Flora simply tells him she made it herself. Then, the unthinkable happens. The Lady of the Lake returns once more, and this time, she's dragging Peter's lifeless body behind her. And just like that, the truth becomes clear. The Peter standing there talking to them isn't really Peter. He's a ghost. But the saddest part is, he himself doesn't realize he's dead. In that very moment, Peter's spirit slips inside Miles's body, controlling him, speaking through his lips. The two of them blur into one being. Hannah watches in silence as Lady of the Lake drags Peter's body back into the lake. The next day, Hannah spots Peter standing beside Miles near the well. Frantic, she rushes over and demands he stay away from the boy. But Peter slips back into Miles's body, taking complete control once again. Speaking through Miles, he tells Hannah he wishes he could leave, that he wishes he could walk away from this cursed place. But his soul is trapped inside the manor, locked away forever. Then, without warning, he shoves her, hard. Hannah falls backward into the well. And just like that, her life is over. Her spirit rises out of her broken body and stands by the edge of the well, staring at what just happened. Miles sees her standing there, looking as solid and real as anyone alive. Confused, he asks what's going on. But before Hannah can answer, Dany arrives at the manor for the very first time, and Hannah greets her as if she were a real flesh and blood person. And here, the truth lands like a punch to the gut. Dany has been talking to Hannah's ghost this entire time. Hannah has been dead all along, her body lying at the bottom of the well. Hannah's soul snaps back to the present, and the first thing she sees is Owen saying his goodbyes, walking off with Jamie as the two of them head home for the night. Stunned, Hannah stands there frozen, devastated by what she just remembered. Her life is over. It has been over for some time now. Meanwhile, Henry is sitting in his office when his secretary informs him that Dany has been calling repeatedly. The nanny needs to speak with him urgently. Henry remains seated, lost in thought, and then a chilling vision unfolds. He imagines another version of himself sitting right across from him, staring straight into his eyes, smiling a wicked, knowing smile. The next morning, Dany is with Jamie, telling her how strange everyone in the manor has been acting lately, especially Hannah, who has been appearing and vanishing without warning, like a flicker of light in the dark. Just then, Dany spots Flora in the garden, walking alone, lost in her own little world. Concerned, she and Jamie head over to her and try to talk to her. But the moment Jamie reaches out and touches her forehead, Flora's eyes roll back and she collapses. Quickly, the two of them carry her up to her room and lay her gently on the bed. When Flora finally comes to, she tells them she had simply been dreaming and reassures them that she's perfectly fine. That night, Dany goes to check on Flora and finds her still fast asleep. Then Hannah walks in, also there to check on the little girl. Confused, Dany turns to her and asks how on earth she keeps disappearing and reappearing the way she does. Calmly, Hannah tells her she had been right beside them the whole time. Then, with a soft smile, she tells Dany she'll go wait for her downstairs. Stepping closer to Flora, Dany leans down to tuck the blanket more snugly around her. As she moves, something catches her eye, a small child playing near the dollhouse. But the moment she turns to look, the little figure is gone. Just her imagination playing tricks on her once again. Later that night, Flora wakes up and walks downstairs to find everyone gathered around the dinner table, eating without her. Hurt and upset, she demands to know why no one called her. Dany tells her gently that she had already eaten earlier, but Flora has no memory of it at all, and looking at her, the entire household can sense it. Something is deeply wrong with the little girl. The story rewinds back to the day Charlotte gave birth to Flora. Henry had been the one at the manor that day, and he calls his brother Dominic with the news. But there's something in the way Henry and Charlotte look at each other, a tenderness, a quiet ache that hints at something far more between them than just family. Years pass, and Flora grows older. One morning, she wakes up to find a strange, terrifying child standing in her room. A small figure with no face, no features at all, just a smooth, hollow blank where a face should be. Heart pounding, she runs straight to her mother's room to tell her what she just saw. But when she arrives, she finds Henry there too. Calmly, Henry explains that he had simply joined Charlotte for breakfast in her room. Flora pulls them both back to her bedroom to show them the terrifying child. But by the time they get there, the figure is gone. Convinced she had only been imagining things, the two adults brush it off entirely. The next day, Henry sits in his office and calls Flora to check on her. Carefully, he asks if she's seen the faceless child again. Flora tells him no. The strange figure hasn't come back. Then, in the most innocent way, she mentions that her father had returned from his trip and told her the very same thing, that she had only been imagining it. She hands the phone over to Dominic, and the moment Henry hears his brother's voice, his whole body stiffens. When Flora's birthday rolls around, Henry presents her with an extraordinary gift, a stunning, intricately crafted miniature of the manor itself. Throughout the celebration, Dominic is unusually quiet, his behavior toward Henry strange and distant, charged with something unspoken. That night, Charlotte heads to the kitchen and finds Dominic sitting alone at the dining table. Calm but heavy, he turns to her and says something that hangs in the air like a blade. Flora was born too early, and by his calculations, that means she was conceived during the months he had been away on business in Russia. He tells her he spent 6 long years turning the thought over in his mind, but every clue, every detail kept pointing in the same direction. Trembling, Charlotte falls silent. Then, quietly, Dominic asks her the question that has been haunting him for years. Is she in love with Henry? Devastated, Charlotte breaks down completely, sobbing into her hands. The next day, Dominic walks straight into Henry's office and tells him he's fired. Flora will remain his daughter, and Henry will never again be allowed to set foot in his house or see any of his children. Soon after, Charlotte goes to see Henry. Heartbroken, she tells him goodbye. She and Dominic are leaving for India, and whatever they once had between them is over. Completely, painfully, finally over. The day they fly out, Henry receives a phone call. His brother and Charlotte have been killed in a tragic accident. The words hit him like a freight train. Stunned, he stands frozen, refusing to believe it, refusing to accept it. And in that very moment, for the first time, Henry transforms into another version of himself, a darker, twisted reflection. Terrified, he stares at his other self in absolute horror. Back in the present, Henry is overwhelmed with grief, drowning in his memories. He decides he needs to get up, get moving, head to the manor at last. But his wicked second self stands in his way, doing everything in its power to stop him. At that exact moment, Flora wakes up with a start, shaken by the memories that had been flooding her dreams. And there, sitting calmly on the edge of her bed, is Rebecca. The ghost tells her she's worried about everything that's been happening, especially Miles, and how strangely he's been acting lately. Just then, Dany walks in. The moment she sees Rebecca sitting there, the breath leaves her lungs. Frantic, she tells Flora to come to her, to step away from the ghost. As she rushes out of the room, she comes face to face with Peter standing right in the hallway. Terrified, she stumbles back. Then, just like that, Rebecca and Peter vanish into thin air. Flora bolts. Dany chases after her, tearing through the manor, all the way down to the cellar. And the moment she catches up, something cold and heavy slams into the back of her head. Miles. He had been waiting in the shadows, and he hits her hard. When Dany comes to, she's terrified, completely lost. unable to grasp what's happening around her. Her panic only deepens when she sees them again, Rebecca and Peter, standing right there in front of her. At the same time, Flora and Miles are genuinely worried about Dany. They turn to Peter and beg him to teach her how to drift between dreams, the way they do. But Rebecca steps in. Gently, she explains to Flora that it isn't something just anyone can do. It takes a special kind of soul. Just then, Rebecca hears strange voices echoing somewhere far away, and she follows them, slipping into another moment entirely. And just like that, we understand what dream hopping really is. Soon after, Hannah knocks on the door. Peter quickly turns to Miles and tells him to repeat his exact words to her. But Miles and Flora exchange confused looks. Neither one of them can hear any knocking at all. And in that moment, the truth lands heavy. Peter is dream hopping too. The story rewinds back to the day a police officer was investigating Hannah and Rebecca about the disappearance of a priceless heirloom from the manor. Henry had filed a report accusing Peter of stealing it. The officer reveals that Peter was a notorious conman, a swindler with a long history of fraud. Stunned, Rebecca sits there in silence, trying to process every word. She tells the officer that, not long ago, Peter had told her he was saving up money so the two of them could run away together to America. But she had no idea he'd been planning to steal anything. Once the officer leaves, Miles approaches Rebecca and tells her that no one believes the story he and Flora have been trying to tell. The Lady of the Lake killed Peter and dragged him into the depths. Even Hannah doesn't remember a thing. The next day, Rebecca is standing alone in the garden, lost in her thoughts. Jamie walks over and stands beside her. Bitterly, Rebecca assumes she's only there to gloat, since Jamie had warned her over and over again that Peter was no good. But Jamie surprises her. Sincerely, she tells Rebecca she's only here to be by her side, to support her through this. No one deserves to suffer the way she has. Then, gently, Jamie suggests she reach out to Henry. Maybe she could work for him directly and finally pursue her dream of becoming a lawyer. Then, out of nowhere, Peter's ghost appears before Rebecca. Stunned, she stares at him in disbelief. Frantically, she tells him the police have been searching for him everywhere, that they've been calling him a thief and a swindler. And then comes the gut punch. Peter confesses. He admits everything. Yes, he had stolen the money. Yes, he had been planning to run, to vanish without ever saying goodbye, without leaving her so much as a note. But he didn't run after all. He tells her he's been at the manor this entire time. She just couldn't see him. But Rebecca isn't buying any of it, so Peter asks her to do something simple. Reach out her hand, he tells her. She'll understand. Slowly, he places his hand on top of hers, and Rebecca's whole world shatters. His hand passes right through her own, like air. Like nothing at all. And just like that, she believes him. Every word, including everything Miles and Flora had been trying to tell her. Heart racing, Rebecca runs straight to the forbidden wing of the manor and calls out to Peter, begging him to appear once more. The moment he does, she pleads with him. They have to leave the manor together. They have to go to America, just like they had planned. But Peter's face falls. Quietly, he confesses the truth. He's trapped inside the manor, locked away with no way out. He's tried over and over to free himself, to escape these walls. But every single time, no matter how far he runs, he finds himself right back where he started. Devastated, Rebecca breaks down. The thought of never being able to touch Peter again, never being able to feel him, sends her spiraling into despair. Frustrated, Peter snaps at her, telling her to stop crying. Then, just like that, he vanishes once again. Wiping her tears, Rebecca turns and glances at her reflection in the mirror. And there he is, Peter, looking right back at her. And here, the truth lands. Peter has found a way to slip inside Rebecca's body, to inhabit her completely. Excited, the two of them hatch a plan. Peter will live inside Rebecca, and together, they'll escape the manor for good. But the moment Rebecca reaches the front gate, an invisible barrier slams into her. She crashes to the ground, and in that very instant, Peter is forced out of her body. Their plan, completely shattered. From that day forward, Rebecca sinks into a deep, suffocating depression. Peter doesn't appear to her again, not after the failed escape. A long, painful week passes. Then, finally, he returns. Eyes shining, he tells her he's found a way for them to truly be together, to touch each other, to feel each other once more. But it requires something from her. She has to trust him completely. She has to let him take control of her memories. Desperate, Rebecca agrees. The moment Peter slips inside her, controlling her every move, he leads her straight to the lake. Slowly, deliberately, he walks her body into the cold, dark water. He drowns her. He ends her life. And just like that, Rebecca's body sinks beside Peter's, the two of them lying side by side at the bottom of the lake. The next day, Flora and Jamie discover Rebecca's lifeless body floating on the surface of the water. Later, Rebecca's spirit comes to inside one of her own memories, a tender moment from the past. Just her and Peter, but the warmth is gone. Devastated, she stares at him, completely shattered by the realization. He had betrayed her. He had let her drown herself. Through her tears, she begs him to tell her how to escape these memories, how to stop drifting between dreams forever. Back in the present, Flora and Miles are doing everything they can to free Dany. But just as they get close, Peter returns. Furious, he snaps at them. Rebecca shows up too, and here the chilling truth comes to light. Peter has made a deal with Miles and Flora. The two children are going to give up their bodies, hand them over, so Peter and Rebecca can live inside them forever. And in exchange, the souls of Miles and Flora will be sent off to be reunited with their parents at last. When Miles and Flora start to falter, when the fear and hesitation creep in, Peter brings out something to convince them. He summons one of the manor's long-dead residents, an old soul whose face has been completely erased, just a smooth, hollow blank where features should be. And here, the chilling truth becomes clear. This is what happens to ghosts and spirits who have been dead for too long. They begin to fade, slowly, painfully, until every trace of who they once were is gone forever. And Peter is terrified that the same fate is coming for him. Frightened, Miles and Flora finally give in. They agree to hand over their bodies. And the moment they do, both children collapse, falling into a deep, lifeless sleep. When they finally come to, they aren't Miles and Flora anymore. They're Peter and Rebecca. Devastated, Dany watches it all unfold, helpless, lost, with no idea how to save the children she has come to love. Soon after, Peter, now living inside Miles's body, walks over to Hannah and asks her to come with him. He has a surprise for her. The two of them walk together through the manor, deeper and deeper, until they finally reach the well. There, Peter, still wearing Miles like a mask, asks Hannah to look down into the well, just so she can wake up. Terrified, Hannah hesitates. Then slowly, she leans over the edge, and what she sees down there shatters her. Her own body, lifeless, lying at the bottom of the well. The truth comes flooding back to her all at once. She remembers everything, her death, her end, and glancing back at Miles, she finally understands. Peter has been inside the boy this whole time. Meanwhile, Rebecca slips out of Flora's body, and here, another piece of the puzzle falls into place. Rebecca had secretly made a pact with Flora. She had promised the little girl that she would never let her stay trapped inside her body forever. The two of them had planned to put on a convincing act, fooling Peter into believing his plan had worked. Quickly, Flora frees Dany from her bonds. Then Rebecca turns to Dany and tells her the heartbreaking truth. For Miles, time has run out. There's nothing more they can do for him. But Flora still has a chance. There's still time to get her out of the manor. So Dany grabs the little girl and runs, racing toward the gate, hoping to make it out before it's too late. But Flora refuses. She refuses to leave without her brother, not without Miles. And just then, the Lady of the Lake appears. It's that fateful hour, the time when she rises from the water and walks the halls each night. She turns toward Dany, and she takes her. The story rewinds all the way back to the mid-17th century, to the days of Lord Willoughby's death. He had two daughters, Viola, the elder, and Perdita, the younger. The day their father passed, Perdita was utterly inconsolable, a sensitive soul whose tears flowed freely and without shame. Viola, on the other hand, was carved from steel, strong, composed, able to endure anything and bury her grief deep beneath the surface where no one could reach it. After their father's death, the two sisters faced an uphill battle, struggling desperately to hold on to the manor that had been their family's home for generations. Back in those days, a woman without a man in her life had no present and certainly no future. So Viola and Perdita leaned on each other, drawing strength from a bond that ran deeper than blood. They loved each other fiercely, with the kind of devotion that only sisters can know. Then, one day, a cousin came to visit them, a man named Arthur. He was handsome, well-educated, a man of influence and standing, and Perdita found herself quietly drawn to him. The two sisters had agreed beforehand that they had to make Arthur marry one of them, no matter which. In the end, Arthur chose Viola, and just like that, Viola had succeeded in saving her family's estate. But peace did not come easy for Viola. She struggled terribly with sleep, waking at the very same hour every single night, drifting through the halls of the manor like a restless shadow. Slowly, with time, real love began to blossom between her and Arthur. Soon after, Viola became pregnant and gave birth to a baby girl named Isabel. Viola was famous for her love of beautiful things, lavish gowns, fine silks, flowing curtains, and dresses so extravagant they were stitched with threads of pure jewels. Then, one day, the unthinkable happened. Viola fell gravely ill. She began coughing violently, her body racked with fits, her handkerchief stained crimson with blood. The doctor was called at once, arriving in a full plague suit, his face hidden behind the long-beaked mask of the era. The plague had been sweeping across the land, claiming lives by the thousands. But the doctor delivered grim news to Arthur and Perdita. Viola did not have the plague. She was suffering from a deadly lung disease, and tragically, she had only a few months left to live. She would have to be isolated immediately, kept far from the rest of the household, because her illness was both contagious and lethal. A room was prepared for her at once, a quiet chamber where she could be sealed away from her loved ones. The doctor tried everything to save her: incense, bloodletting worms, acupuncture, every desperate remedy of the age. Months passed, then years. Isabel grew older, and after 5 long years, everything had changed. Arthur and Perdita began to grow close, dangerously close, until what bloomed between them was no longer just sisterly affection. It was love. Real, undeniable love. And one day, stepping out of her isolation chamber, Viola saw it with her own eyes. There they were, dancing together in the great hall, lost in each other, holding each other with a tenderness that only lovers share. By then, Viola's condition had grown dire, her body weak, her face pale and hollow. Out of nowhere, in a fit of fury, she struck Perdita hard across the face. Perdita took her gently by the arm and led her back to her chamber to rest. Time dragged on. Eventually, Viola made a decision. She gathered every last piece of her jewelry and every gown she owned and locked them all inside a great wooden chest, intending for her daughter Isabel to inherit them after her death. One day, Arthur was forced to leave on business. Times had grown hard and the family's finances were dwindling fast. While he was away, Perdita watched her sister suffer day after day, drowning in the slow agony of her illness. And finally, she made a choice. A merciful one, she told herself. She decided to put Viola out of her misery once and for all. Quietly, she ended her sister's life. Sometime after Viola's death, Arthur began to see traces of his late wife in Perdita. The same eyes, the same gestures, the same warmth. And in his grief, he made the decision to marry her. But 3 years passed, and Perdita could not bear him a child. Worse, Isabel rejected her completely, refusing to ever accept her aunt as a mother in place of the one she had lost. As the years dragged on, Arthur's financial troubles only grew darker. Desperate, Perdita suggested they finally open Viola's chest and use what was inside: the dresses, the jewels, the fortune sitting locked away. But Arthur refused outright. The chest, he insisted, was Isabel's inheritance, the last piece of her mother she had left in this world. They would not touch it, but Perdita couldn't let it go. One day, while Arthur was away, she crept into his study and stole the key to the chest. Heart pounding, she made her way to the locked treasure and slowly turned the key. The lid creaked open. And then, out of nowhere, 2 pale hands shot up from inside the chest and wrapped themselves tight around her throat. They squeezed, harder and harder, until Perdita's life slipped away. When Arthur returned to the manor, he was met with a sight that would haunt him forever. Perdita, lifeless on the floor beside the chest, her face frozen in a horrifying, unnatural expression. The story rewinds to the very day Viola passed. Her soul stirred awake, only to find herself trapped inside the chest, sealed in complete darkness. She didn't understand. She couldn't grasp the truth, that she was no longer alive, that she had become nothing more than a ghost. Time crawled by slowly, agonizingly, with Viola in the very same state, day after endless day. And finally, the truth settled in. She was dead. And no one would open the chest, no one would set her free, until her daughter Isabel was old enough to inherit it. So she waited. And she waited. Years passed. Years stretched into decades. Until at last, the day came. The day Perdita opened the chest. And the moment those 2 hands shot out and wrapped around her throat, those were Viola's hands. She had decided to take Perdita's life, exactly the way Perdita had taken hers. Then one day, Arthur and his daughter made a chilling decision. Frightened that the chest had been cursed, that anything that drew near it was doomed to die, they cast it into the lake, sinking it forever beneath the dark, still waters. And in that moment, Viola's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, completely, utterly broken. After that, she began to rise. Every single night, Viola's spirit would crawl out of the lake, drift into the manor, and walk the halls in silence. And every time, the memories tore at her, ate away at her, killing her over and over again. Until one night, she fell asleep and woke up forgetting. From that night on, every time she slept, she'd wake with a little less of herself. Piece by piece, her memories faded into nothing, until eventually, she forgot her own name. She forgot who she was. And little by little, even her face began to vanish, the features melting away into a smooth, empty blank. And then, one fateful night, just like every other, Viola drifted into the manor. There, she came across a small child, an innocent little soul wandering through the halls. Without thinking, she took the child by the hand and led her down to the lake. And in that moment, the haunting truth comes to light. All those souls Viola has taken from the manor over the centuries, all those innocent victims, eventually became ghosts themselves. With time, their faces faded too, melting into smooth, hollow voids, just like hers had. And here they were, trapped inside the manor forever, locked behind invisible walls, unable to leave the place that had claimed them. And now, the final piece of the puzzle slides into place. Viola is the Lady of the Lake, the very same haunting figure who walks the halls every single night, the one Flora and Miles had been seeing all along. And her latest victim, her newest soul, was Dany. Back in the present, Hannah hears Flora's piercing screams echoing through the manor. Rushing to find her, Hannah catches sight of the Lady of the Lake, Viola, dragging Dany away. Bravely, Hannah steps right in front of her, trying to block her path. But Viola passes through her as if she's nothing more than mist, brushing her aside without a second thought. Then, dragging Dany along, Viola heads straight for the forbidden wing of the manor. And there, the moment her eyes land on Flora, she lets Dany go. She wants the little girl instead. Just then, Henry finally arrives at the manor, bursting through the doors after his long, agonizing journey. The first thing he sees is Viola, hauling Flora toward the lake. Without hesitation, he lunges forward to wrestle the little girl free. But Viola turns on him in an instant. Her cold, ghostly hands wrap around his throat, and she throws him to the ground like a rag doll, squeezing the life out of him. Just in time, Owen rushes in and pulls Henry to safety, saving him from certain death. Meanwhile, Dany races down to the lake. Standing face to face with Viola, she pleads with her again and again, offering up something unthinkable. She tells Viola she's ready, willing to give her body. Forever. To let her live inside her for eternity. And then, out of nowhere, Viola stops. She stands perfectly still, staring deep into Dany's eyes. Slowly, she steps closer, and in one quiet, miraculous moment, she releases Flora into Dany's arms and vanishes into the mist. At the very same time, Peter is forced out of Miles's body, and the boy gasps back to life. Tears streaming, Henry pulls Flora and Miles into the tightest, most desperate embrace, apologizing to them through broken sobs for being absent for so long. The next day, the truth about Hannah finally surfaces. They discover her body lying lifeless at the bottom of the well. The Hannah they had been speaking to all this time, laughing with, sharing meals with, was nothing more than her gentle, lingering spirit. Time passes, and the manor finally falls quiet. Peaceful. The strange occurrences fade away into nothing, and the halls feel safe once more. Henry sits with his late brother's children, doting on them, caring for them with all the love he has. And he keeps his secret buried deep inside his heart, never telling a soul that Flora is, in truth, his very own daughter. Soon after, Jamie sits with Dany and notices something off about her. Tense and heavy-hearted, Dany opens up to her at last. She confesses that she can feel Viola inside her, can feel her emotions swirling beneath her own skin, a deep, simmering rage that doesn't belong to her. It's as if their souls have merged into one, and Viola is simply waiting, biding her time for the right moment to take her. Stunned, Jamie listens in disbelief. But she does her best to calm her, to reassure her, to keep her grounded. Soon after, Dany and Jamie say their goodbyes to Flora and Miles, and Henry thanks Dany sincerely for everything she has done, for her care, for her love, for saving the children he had failed. Sometime later, Dany goes to visit Jamie at the small flower shop she has opened. But the moment she steps inside, her blood runs cold. Her reflection in the glass isn't her own anymore. Staring back at her is the face of Viola. One day, while at home with Jamie, Dany is washing dishes when she suddenly sees Viola in the water of the sink, watching her, waiting. Terrified, Dany drops the plate, shattering it across the floor. Trembling, she turns to Jamie and confesses the truth. She's been seeing Viola again. And this isn't the first time. The next day, Jamie comes home to find their house completely flooded with water. And there, sitting beside the bathtub, is Dany, gazing into it with a far-off, vacant stare. And in that chilling moment, the truth lands hard. Dany has become a danger to Jamie. At any moment, Viola could take over completely, and Jamie's life could be the price. The very next morning, Jamie wakes up to an empty house. Dany is gone. In her place, a single note. "The hour of the beast has come," it reads. She had to leave. Heart pounding, Jamie races back to the manor. She heads straight for the lake, and without a moment's hesitation, she wades into the cold, dark water, deeper and deeper, until at last she finds her, Dany, resting at the bottom of the lake. And here, the heartbreaking truth becomes clear. Dany has now become the new Lady of the Lake. Viola had locked her soul inside the water forever. But Dany, ever the stronger spirit, was the one in control. She had made a vow, a quiet, powerful vow, that no one else would ever lose their life to that lake again. Not on her watch. She would never let Viola steal another soul, ever. Back at the wedding gathering, the storyteller finishes her tale, and the room is utterly still. Every guest is moved beyond words. The bride sits beside her, holding her close, the story having stirred something deep inside her own heart. Quietly, she tells the storyteller that her own middle name is Flora. On the day of the wedding, the storyteller is there too, glancing across the crowd at two of the guests. And here, the truth lands like a soft, beautiful echo. Those two men are Owen and Miles, all grown up. The storyteller turns her gaze toward the bride and the man dancing with her. The bride, it turns out, is Flora herself, and the uncle holding her in his arms on the dance floor is Henry. When the storyteller finally returns to her hotel room that night, the final piece slides into place, is Jamie. And here, the ending opens itself up to two possibilities. The first is that Jamie deliberately changed the names and twisted the details of her story so that no one in the room would recognize themselves, so that no one would have to remember. The second is that Owen, Miles, Flora, and Henry had all simply forgotten everything the moment they walked out of that manor and left it behind for good. And just like that, the story comes to a quiet, haunting close. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts with me in the comments. Goodbye for now.